Thank you guys so much for joining me. If you're here for the first time, my name is Shemaine, and I have a very special guest today. His name is Ian Morgan Cron, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, but I wanted to go through a couple of housekeeping things. Those people who are sticking around at the end, we're going to take some questions from everybody who's watching. So if you want to connect with me, you can check out my website at ShemaineNugent.rocks. Please feel free to connect with me at ShemaineHealthyHappy@gmail.com. That's Shemaine, Shemane, healthy happy at gmail.com. Also, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, but now we are live with Ian Morgan Cron. And I want to tell everybody, if you've never heard about our guest, let me tell you just a little bit about him. Ian is a best-selling author, psychotherapist, Enneagram teacher, Episcopal priest, the host of a popular podcast, Typology, and his books include Chasing Francis, the spiritual memoir, Jesus, My Father, the CIA, and Me. We got to talk about that. And The Road Back to You, which brings me to you, Ian, an Enneagram journey to self-discovery. He's known for his transparency, humor, we'll get along great here, and depth of insight into the inner workings of the human heart and mind. Ian uses Enneagram personality typing system as a tool to help leaders cultivate self-awareness and emotional wisdom. He is a sought-after speaker, thinker, and advisor to a growing roster of clients such as the Discovery Channel, Ramsey Solutions, and the Michael Hyatt Company, among others. He and his family live in Tennessee. Welcome, Ian. Thank you so much for joining me.
So I have a wonderful portfolio life of different things that I do, but principally I'm an author, and I just have a wonderful life talking with people about who they are and who they want to become, and helping them grow in an awareness of the world in which they live and their way of being.
Let's talk about the Enneagram first. Let's introduce it. And just for people who are watching, because I got to tell you, I'm 56 years old, and I just found out about the Enneagram from our mutual friend, Karen Anderson, about a month ago. And it blew my mind. So tell us the basics about the Enneagram, and then why it sparked an interest in you and why you became a teacher.
Yeah. Well, when I was in grad school, back in the, I'm your age, so back in the day, when I was in grad school doing my degree in counseling psychology, I happened to go on a retreat to a Catholic retreat center where I found a book about the Enneagram there. And I remember reading it. I had been in grad school for a whole year, and I remember reading it and thinking, hey, where has this been? I've been studying Adler and Freud and Carl Jung, among others, and here was this incredibly concise, uncannily accurate, and very helpful typology, that describes 9 different personality types and their way of being in the world. And I thought, holy smokes, this isn't the Rosetta Stone, but gosh, it's very efficient and incredibly, incredibly helpful for people. So that's where the journey began, and it's been a wonderful one ever since.
Let's go back and talk a little bit more about the Enneagram and what it is and why there are 9 specific personality types. And we talked about, when I was introducing you, talked about the CIA and Michael Hyatt and who uses the Enneagram and why.
Sure. Well, so the Enneagram is an ancient personality typology system that suggests or teaches that there are 9 basic personality types in the world, one and only one of which we gravitate toward and adopt in childhood as a way to feel safe and to cope and make our way in the world. Each of those 9 types has an unconscious motivation that drives the way it thinks, acts, feels, and its way of perceiving the world around them. And once you know your type and the types of others, it really opens your eyes to the differences, how different other people are, and it really elevates your level of compassion and understanding for yourself and for other people. It's a remarkable, remarkable tool. That's about as quick a description as I can give for you.
I've been doing a lot of soul searching, so to speak, and personal development. And when I discovered, I played the victim for years and years. And when I started doing all this personal development work, I kept thinking, but prior to that, it's not me. I'm perfect. Not really, but everybody thinks that it's not me, it's the other person.
Right.
Whereas, guess what, girlfriend? Not you, Ian, but guess what? It really is you. And the more that we work on ourselves and the more that we understand our personality type and others, for example, Ian, I don't know if you know who my husband is. Do you?
Yes.
Okay. He's not a 2.
Really?
He's not a 2.
What a shock.
No, I'm a 2. He's probably an 8, but I heard in your, I'm listening to your audio book. And if you haven't gotten Ian's book, The Road Back to You, I downloaded it on my Kindle, and I also listened to it because I just want to learn. I'm a sponge right now. I want to be the best that I can be. And it starts with me. It starts with uncovering the layers like in an onion and peeling it back. And you know what? You do cry when you get deep down inside and when you figure out you are the way that you are because of certain defense mechanisms that you learned, right or wrong, as a child. It's a means of self-preservation. But now, like looking at, for example, my husband and I, we're almost polar opposites personality-wise. But now when he says certain things, I get where he's coming from. I get that. And what the Enneagram has allowed me to do is to just tweak my responses in a way that benefits him most, and then ultimately me.
Absolutely. I can tell you that as a therapist, I can do in 2 or 3 sessions what used to take me 9 months to a year using the Enneagram. I can get a core issue so quickly and help people open their eyes and go, oh my gosh, that's how you see the world? That's what you think when I say this? It is, and boy, oh boy, it lands true just about every time.
And does it not boil down to the ego?
Well, a lot boils down to the ego.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot. But the way that we behave, the way that we do.
Yeah, of course. I think, the ego has one job, essentially, and that is to keep you alive. Its job is to help us survive and protect us from harm. So it does its job. It's not all bad. People tend to think the ego is just all about being self-centered and selfish and, sort of self-interested. It's not entirely. Its job is to keep us safe. Now, one of the things it does when we're very little is it says, the world is kind of a dangerous place and you have to protect who you are from injury and harm. So I'm going to create a persona or a personality that's constituted of, defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms and strategies for getting my basic needs met. And out of that emerges personality, right? Our way of being in the world. Now, obviously, personality is pretty complicated. So I'm giving a very 100,000 foot kind of summary of it. But yeah, a lot does come down to the ego and learning to steward it and tame it. And as I tell people all the time, you want to be a person who has a personality, not someone whose personality has them. In other words...
Wait, say that again?
Yeah,
say that again?
Sure. You want to be someone who has a personality, not someone whose personality has them. Does that make sense to you? In other words, people tend to learn patterns and behaviors and ways of being in the world, many of which helped you get through childhood, but in adulthood start to become self-limiting and boxing in your potential. Because, as Carl Jung used to say, the things that got you through the morning of life will not help you in the afternoon of life, So, I think one of the things the Enneagram does is point out those aspects of our personality that we need to disidentify with, to actually sometimes just stop being hooked into and begin to live out of a more true self. versus one that is kind of stuck in some childhood patterns that don't work for us anymore.
And a lot of what happens to us now, as you said, as you just mentioned, what worked for us when we were kids is not working now. But a lot of us play the victim mentality as a means of getting attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would you say, for example, you had somebody coming into your office and wanted help, and let's say they were in a difficult situation with somebody who was always blaming things on them, just so to speak. How would you deal with that?
Well, I'd probably go back to the beginning and say, well, let's take, if I was using the Enneagram, I'd say, okay, well, let's go back and identify your type, right? And for those who don't know, there are 9 different types. And, you know, as I mentioned, each has an unconscious motivation that drives the way they think, act, and feel. And do you want me to run through the 9 types super fast? Would that be helpful?
Yes, that would be awesome.
Okay, and then we'll circle around your question about, you know, people who blame other people. Right? So there are 9 types. I'm going to give a super fast rundown, okay? Ones are called the perfectionists. These are people who have an unconscious motivation that they just feel a need to perfect themselves, others, and the world. They have a need to be good. They're wonderful people when they're healthy in their personality, when they're self-aware. This is true of every type. But when they're unhealthy, they can become very, very critical and judgmental, and they have such high standards that others just can't seem to ever live up to them. So often around them, you'll feel a kind of a leaking resentment, you know, that the world is just not doing it the right way, which is frankly their way most of the time, right? 2,
because they want to control it.
Yeah, it's about control. They really struggle with the issue of anger. You know, anger is a very big issue for them, right? And the anger gets directed inwardly. It gets directed inwardly at themselves. And so they're very self-critical. They have a constant loop of self-criticism going on in their head all the time. You could have done this better. You should have done this better. You ought to do this better. And, you know, that can be a tough place to live. But that's when they're unhealthy. When they're healthy, oh my gosh. Have you seen Mr. Rogers yet, the film Mr. Rogers?
I have not. I want to go see that, though.
Oh, you have to see it. Oh, he's so great. Because I think he's a very healthy one on the Enneagram. All right. 2s. 2s are called the helpers. Sometimes they're called the befrienders. I like that, too. They have a need to be needed. 2s want to be needed by other people. And when they're healthy, they give without any expectation of return. When they're unhealthy, right, there's always a little bit of a hook. And the hook is, I'm going to take care of your needs so long as we have this silent contract that you will take care of my needs when I need your help without my ever having to ask for it, you know? So here's what happens with 2s. One of the things that 2s struggle with is really the passion, or we could call it the deadly sin of pride, right? Which is 2s tend to think that they know what other people need more than those people do. You know what I mean? And they will jump in reflexively, compulsively, heaping assistance on other people, trying to meet their needs. And when they burn out, oh boy, it's not good. They really can blow up and say, hey, why doesn't anyone ever take care of my needs? You know? The problem is not everybody has the superpower that 2s do to recognize the needs in other people without their having to tell them what they are, right? 3s are called the achievers. These are people who have a need to be successful, to appear successful, and to avoid failure at all costs. These are your type A personalities. Oftentimes, they're people who are incredibly charismatic, great leaders. When they walk in a room, they can just read it. And they know what other people want them to be and become in order to win their approval, because they're approval junkies, right? They really need approval. And what they actually are looking for, maybe even more, you know, kind of zeroed in, is admiration. They want to be admired by other people, right? So when they're unhealthy, they kind of are subject to the deadly sin of deceit, but they're not so much fooling others as they are fooling themselves, because they wear a lot of masks. They keep shifting masks in order to and win the admiration of others. And then what happens is that they don't know who they are anymore. They just keep identifying with whatever mask they're wearing, right? Fours are called the individualists. Disproportionate number of these people in the arts. These are people who have a need, an unconscious motivation or need to feel special or unique. You know, special or unique. Think about Bob Dylan, you know. Think about, I don't know, Johnny Depp would be a good example of a four. Have a need to be seen, and incredibly creative, incredibly imaginative, incredibly melancholy. So, for example, you are exquisitely attuned to the feelings of other people. Is that right?
Right.
Like, you just intuit. You can see it before they do, right? Fours are exquisitely, Fours are exquisitely attuned to their own feelings. So,
yeah,
right,
see, I don't have that problem.
No, because actually, if I asked you, what are you feeling? A lot of times you would look at me blank. You'd be like, I don't know.
Right.
Because you've spent a lifetime so focused on the feelings of other people, you've lost touch with your own.
Yes. Yep.
You don't know what you need or what you want. You know what everyone else needs and wants.
It's very difficult for me to, number one, accept a compliment. Number two, I'd rather focus on the needs of others than my own. But then at the end of the day, there's something, you feel like there's something missing and you don't know what that is.
Yes.
And it's because you don't focus on your own needs and put yourself first, which I'm recently learning how to do.
Yeah, so twos really need to learn about self-care and not burning themselves out, taking care of everybody else but themselves, you know?
Yep. Okay, so where are we? We're on fours or fives?
Let's go to fives. Yeah.
Okay.
So, by the way, I would say that about fours, and I'm a four, there are fewer fours in the population than any other type. And I guess we love that because it makes us special and unique. But, you know, they're mysterious people that are very hard to understand sometimes. So, all right, fives. Think Bill Gates. I don't know if he's a five or not, but, you know, I sort of associate fives with him. If you like the actor Anthony Hopkins, I mean, I just think he's such a five, you know. So fives are people who have an unconscious need to understand everything. I mean, just everything. They have a need to gather as much information and ideas. They love models. They are the most analytical number on the Enneagram. They can also be aloof. They have the appearance of being kind of aloof, distant, kind of sometimes intellectually superior. They are like...
I think my dog is a five.
Yeah. I have a dog. He's a 7. We'll get to that. No, I mean, these are amazing people, but they are also people who have, you know, kind of a sense that they're inadequate and inept, and so they try to compensate by just gathering information compulsively. It's like out of control. They just want to know everything as a defense against the world. And people will tell you that they're also probably the most emotionally unavailable number on the Enneagram. All right. Sixes.
Okay, sixes.
We think there are more sixes in the world than any other type. Sixes have a need, a deep need to feel secure and to feel supported by other people. They're called the loyalists or the devil's advocates. You know about worst case scenario thinkers? You ever met one?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. That's the 6. Okay. Those are sixes. So sixes are always scanning the horizon, looking for what could go wrong next. I have a friend of mine who is a 6, and he likes to say, I have pre-traumatic stress disorder.
Pre-traumatic.
Yeah. He's always getting ready for what could go wrong, you know? And so these are folks who are intensely loyal, but they're self-doubting, they're deep questioners. And the reason we call them the devil's advocate is because they're always sort of scanning the horizon, looking for what can go wrong, is they are incredibly good at finding the one thing that could go awry in a plan, you know? So can I give you an example of that? So
go for it.
Oh yeah. So I had I grew up in a world of sixes. I was surrounded by sixes growing up. So I had a woman who helped raise me. She was a six, and she was the type who would always say, "Don't run with scissors. You'll stab your sister," you know, or lock the door, because if you don't, we could get carjacked, or we're gonna don't stand in front of the microwave. You'll turn out like your cousin Marty, right? And so there was always this kind of fear and anxiety running in the background that something bad could happen. All right, moving on. Sevens, one of my favorite numbers. Think Stephen Colbert. Think of these are the joy bombs. They're called the enthusiasts, which is a great type. They have an unconscious need to avoid psychological and emotional pain. They want to just stay happy all the time. When they're not very healthy, they're a little bit like Peter Pan. They just don't want to grow up. The deadly sin they wrestle with really is gluttony. And what I mean by that is, it's not about food. It's about, they have this gluttonous desire to consume as many new and fascinating adventures and ideas, and they're always got their head in the future and thinking about wonderful things they're going to do, all in pursuit of staying away from any kinds of difficult or uncomfortable feelings. All right. So eights, let's talk about your husband for a second. All right. Whoa. All right. So
tell me what I don't know.
Okay. So my daughter is an 8. My mother is an 8. Okay. My mother is an 8. All right. So eights are called the challengers. And the reason they're called the challengers is because they are notoriously blunt, larger than life, shoot from the hip, big personalities. Oftentimes, those personalities come off as being intimidating, overwhelming, and frightening for a lot of people, right? So their unconscious motivation is to assert control and strength over the environment in order to mask vulnerability and weakness. Eights come off as being all tough and armored up and ready to go. But when you really get to know one, you discover that they have a very squishy middle. They're very tender on the inside, but they're also very afraid of being hurt or betrayed by other people. So there's all this kind of, powering up and, getting ready for the fight. It's almost signaling to the world, like, don't mess with me. Just don't mess with me. And that's a defense, When at the center of their hearts, there's a lot of innocence. A lot of innocence. All right, last one. Nines are called the peacemakers. These are people that are very Hakuna Matata. This is like Margaritaville on the inside, And they have a need to avoid conflict at all costs. They just want to be peaceful on the inside, no matter what. And so, what they end up doing is avoiding a lot of investment in themselves, and they merge with the desires and the opinions and the preferences of other people in order to not make waves. They just never want to rock the boat, right? And again, just to say this again, when you're healthy and self-aware, every single one of these personality types is beautiful. When you're not self-aware and you're unhealthy in personality, meaning you're just on autopilot, you're just going around in these patterns, many of which are not good when they're unhealthy. And, you do yourself and others a great disservice in the world. So all beautiful, all need work.
So let's go back to the Enneagram, and there were the 7 deadly sins plus 2. This is how it all came to be. And how does the CIA, for example, and other huge corporations use the Enneagram?
Totally. So the CIA, as I understand it, uses it for obviously typing personalities of other global leaders, and because the personality tends to be fairly predictable and stable over time. So you can predict, oftentimes, reasonably accurately how people are going to respond and react in different situations. In corporations, I mean, I'll just tell you what, I did a work with a corporation recently, went through a whole day, right? So it takes me a whole day to really get through this thing. And people began to look around the room and go, oh my gosh, now I get it. I mean, seriously, like people
yes.
Like
that's how it was. That's how it was with me. Like not that I was asleep, but for those of you who are just joining, I'm interviewing Ian Cron, who is an author, a best-selling author, and we're talking about Enneagram. And if you don't know what it is, we just went through the 9 different types. And I thought I was pretty aware. I have been a soul seeker and searcher and a sponge, and I want to be the best that I can be. But when I recently, like a month ago, found out about the Enneagram, I feel like I was asleep before. And now I get it. I look at the people around me, I can relate to them better. And it's not just about what I like about what you said in your book, and I'm listening to this on audio as well, is that it's not about one type is better than the other. It's about understanding your type and how and why you work the way that you do, and being healthy and being aware of yourself. And what I do, I wanted to also talk to you about SNAP.
Okay, so once you know your type, and by the way, I just gave such a tiny little summary of each of the types.
Yes, there's so much.
Oh yeah, there's tons. So when you know your type and you're familiar with the game that your type plays, right? And you know what it looks like when it's healthy and when it's unhealthy. You know what it's like when it's aware and awake, and you have a good internal kind of awareness. And when you're asleep, and you just that feeling of when you're asleep in life, you're just going through like a robot. You're like in the trance. You're just lost, not very self-aware, and that's when you get in trouble. So what I tell people about SNAP is this. I tell them to stop a couple of times a day. I actually have a setting on my phone 3 or 4 times a day that comes up, just says SNAP on it. Right? SNAP means stop. Most of us don't stop. And what I mean by stop pretty much is wake up, take a couple of deep breaths, and just come back home to yourself. Because most of the time we're lost in thoughts and we're making movies is what I call it. We're making movies.
Oh my gosh. I have a projector in my mind that actually is nothing like what the real life scenario is. But what I love about what you're asking people to do is stop and go within. We're so busy now. We're doing so many things. We've got kids and we're constantly taking care of homes and cars and offices and groceries and everything else. But we need to stop and take notice of what's going on with ourselves. How do we feel?
Yes.
And asking those questions. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, and by the way, you are a multi-projector person. Right? We have multiple stories going on. We are a multiplex. This is going on with my husband. This is what's going on with my kids. This is what's going on with the person who works with me. It's like we're reading minds and making up stories all the time, right?
And sometimes I play a movie in my mind that isn't going to happen. It probably never will happen, but I still, what if? I'm a little bit of that too.
Yes, absolutely. So the second word is N, which is notice, right? And notice just means observe what's happening inside. That's all, without judgment, without, trying to fix it, maybe not even trying to name it. You're just sort of observing, well, what's going on right now? Now, this is particularly helpful when you start to have like a bad feeling. SNAP is great when you have what are called aversive feelings you want to not deal with, right? You want to push away. So if you start to feel ashamed, or you start feeling depressed, or you're really anxious, or you're really angry about something, it's like pull out SNAP, man. It's like whenever I have a feeling that makes me uncomfortable, I'm like, okay, stop, notice what is going on right now. And I may be like, I'm anxious. I didn't know I was anxious until I stopped, but here it is. I've been lost in anxiety. And then I'm like, well, what are you anxious about? What's the movie that you're making, dude? You know what I mean? Like, just what's going on inside? And once I can sort of nail what's going on, then I go to the question A, right? S-N-A. I'm now at ask. And ask is this. And have you read Byron Katie by any chance?
A little bit.
Okay, so it's not dissimilar to what she does a little bit. So I ask myself a couple of questions in the ask phase, which is, what are you believing right now? You know, what's the story you are caught in at this moment, right? So let's say I'm feeling disappointed in myself. I may say, well, I feel like I'm the worst father in the world because I haven't talked to my kids in days, and, you know, they seem distant, far away. Okay, I'm making a movie, aren't I? I'm starting to make a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I ask myself, all right, what are you believing right now? And I'll say, I'm a loser dad. And then the second question I might ask is that true? And I'll go, I don't know. They got well fed. I sent them to good schools. I loved them as best I knew how. And they seem pretty well adjusted. I mean, they got their problems, but they're hanging in there. And then I might say the last question is, do you want to stay in this movie? Like, is this movie really true? And do you want to stay in it? Because you fall into this one a lot, you know? And I go, no, I really don't. Which leads me to the P, which is to pivot, right? It's just to say, you know what? I don't really have to stay in this thing. I can actually pivot out and start to live a different story than the one I'm stuck in right now that my personality tends to slot me in.
Let me ask, what if you say or do something and you're at Snap, you're going through, you're asking your questions, am I a loser dad or mom or whatever, but let's say you say or do something that hurt somebody else's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, when you pivot, what should you do?
Yeah. Well, make amends. You know, I mean, go to that person. I mean, you know, part of this is, you know, realizing, like, as you were saying earlier, like the ego can really get in the way of a lot of the happiness that we're looking for in life. It really can.
Mm-hmm.
It can lock us into patterns of behavior that are in thinking, acting, and feeling, of personality that just are dysfunctional. And so part of the way that, you know, if I start to feel like, you know, I've hurt somebody or I've done something, it's like, I got to pony up, you know, I gotta go and say, hey, what's happening here? And, you know, my relationship, you know, as a friend of mine used to say, like in our about marriage, he used to say, do you want to be right or do you want to be married?
Yeah.
And so
let me write that down.
Yeah. Do you want to be right or you want to be married? Because
yeah,
you know,
it's so true. And we find, I know you're married, right?
yeah.
And Ted and I have been married for 29 years. And there are times when we get into a habitual conversation where the first thing in our mind just comes out. And then afterwards you might say, oh, I didn't mean to say it that way. I didn't mean for you to take it that way. But oftentimes we need to stop, do the snap and pivot, or I remember one time we were driving and I knew my husband was going the wrong way and he was talking and he was into something. And I thought, you know, I'm not going to be the nagging wife going, turn right, turn right, turn right, turn right. I'll just let him figure it out. And sometimes that's what we need to do is, do you want to be right or do you want to be married or do you want to have friends?
Totally.
And, you know, that's as parents too. My son is 28 and it's so hard. I never had, with my son Rocco, I never had the terrible 2s or 3s or 5s or whatever. Really, I didn't have any difficult scenarios with him growing up. But the 20s were tough for me, mostly because what?
You're describing my life.
Oh, well, mostly because I had to step back and let him make his own decisions. Do you see how hard I'm holding on to this chair? Like, that was so hard for me, and I'm still learning it. But now I know that when I do come across those situations, either with my son or with family or friends, I can do snap. Now, I want to ask you, because we were getting some questions on our Facebook Live, and this is going to be a podcast as well. I'm going to ask one of the questions from Kevin Scholl, who's on Facebook, and he was asking, what's the best way to take the Enneagram test? I know there's a couple of different tests, but how do you recommend people get started in finding out about the Enneagram?
I recommend they read my book. I mean, honestly, and I'm not saying that because I'm all into book sales, although, I'm not opposed. I got one kid in college. But the reason I say that is that self-report assessments are oftentimes, they have a pretty good margin of error because they just do. It doesn't matter which one, Myers-Briggs, any of them, they have a little bit of error margins.
Yes.
It's much better to read about your type than take a test. But if you're I'd recommend you go to exploreyourtype.com, and where you can take my assessment there. And if nothing else, it gets you into the conversation about who you are, right? But I do strongly recommend people read The Road Back to You. I could recommend other books too. And if possible, get to a workshop. Spend a whole day. You're worth it. Invest in yourself. Find out what's going on. It'll really help you. So exploreyourtype.com, but also read a book, particularly mine.
Yes, definitely. And that's when I literally have like 5 Enneagram books, yours included. I'm looking at empaths and the 12 type Enneagram and the Enneagram in love and work and the wisdom of the Enneagram and The Road Back to You. Like, I just went all in and I bought everything I could because I want to learn more about this because it's already worked so well for me. But tell me really quick, and we're going to wrap up in just a few minutes, but tell me really quick, Ian, how does the CIA use this? We didn't really get into that too much about projecting personalities.
Yeah, so let's say you've got a foreign leader or you're working with a person inside of an organization, and you can, from a distance, if you're lucky, remember, it's very hard sometimes to type another person. It's much better for them to type themselves to find out what it is. But you can, if you really know the system, you can begin to sort of speculate in ways that can be fairly accurate. In different situations, then you can know, okay, given this circumstance, chances are this is how they are going to respond. Okay.
Based on what type this person is.
Right.
If you have an idea because of his background, because of how he was brought up, he will probably, the next thing he might do is go to X, Y, or Z.
Exactly. I mentioned earlier that I work with a company, and inside of the organization, like I said, it was like scales falling from their eyes. And now when I went back for a follow-up, it's a big company. I walked down the hallway, and not every single one of their doors, there's like 100 doors, was their Enneagram number. And when people walked in,
seriously?
And everybody had learned each other's numbers. And so when you saw it, you were reminded, and then it makes communication so much easier. It eliminates so much misunderstanding in people's responses, So here's an example. Your husband's an 8, right? So
right.
8s are big personalities.
Oh, so you typed him. You typed him, huh?
No, you told me.
No, I did, yeah. I know.
No, I mean, they are big, they're loud, they're brash, they're blunt, they can be steamrollers, they're not diplomats, right? So I tell people who work with 8s, I go, look, they're not going to knock on your door, they're going to walk in. So if you're a private person, I'm sorry, they're going to bust in the door. Now, then I tell 8s, stop.
Yeah, the first date that we had, I've never had this happen to me before. The first date that my husband and I went out on, he started eating off of my plate.
Oh yeah.
Like, didn't ask, just started that. I'd never had that happen before. Now, obviously it's so natural, but it's helped me understanding the Enneagram has helped me understand people aren't out to get you and I. They're really trying to do the best that they can do. And that's all we're really talking about here, about the Enneagram. It helps us understand ourselves, why we do the things that we do, and help us understand other people as well.
Right, but it also can help your husband and others, right, with their particular types, like to learn, why don't you ask before you take something off of someone else's plate? That's not going to work. Well, well, if it's working for you,
that's not going to work.
But
right,
it's.
Go ahead.
Well, one of the things I love about the Enneagram is it doesn't just point out what's good about you. That'll happen if you want to take, Strengths Finder or something like that. It's going to show you where your issues are. And so with 8s, part of the things that 8s have to do is learn moderation, to pull back, to be more to be more attuned to other people's feelings in the moment, to be more, 8s are not the most self-reflective people you've ever met.
And you know how the Enneagram has helped me. And can you imagine having a heated debate with an 8? Debate with an 8. It's very difficult, but what it has helped me do is to understand, like, my first reaction when somebody attacks me verbally. I don't mean attack in a, axe murdering type of way. I mean, says something that pushes my buttons.
Yes.
My ego is the first thing my ego comes out and goes, no, you can't say that. Our natural defense mechanism is to defend ourselves and to say why we did what we did. But with an 8, that's exactly what you should not do. Right? But what I have learned is there's a time for having those discussions, and it's not during that heated debate. Yeah. So sometimes you literally have to walk away and then approach it at a different point when there's a neutral playing field.
So can I actually make a suggestion to you about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to slightly disagree with you.
Okay.
So if an 8 powers up on you, what is best in many situations is to power up and meet them with the same level of passion and intensity that they are meeting you with. And not to escalate.
I'll tell you what, Ian, you do that with my husband and see how that goes for you.
Well, so,
I understand what you're saying, and I've tried that, but there's no winning a debate with an 8 for me anyway. I understand. Sometimes it does work. It depends, I think. How about this? It depends what your wing is. We haven't even talked about what a wing is.
Right. Yes, we have.
Let's go, because we're gonna wrap this up really quick in just a few minutes. But quickly describe what a wing is.
Yeah. So the number's adjacent to your number. So you're a 2. You could have a 1 wing or a 3 wing, right? Those are the numbers on either side of your number. And what that means is that you pick up a few of the characteristic traits of that type, your dominant wing, the one that really is most like you on the side. So, if you were a 2 with a 1 wing, you'd have elements of the perfectionist kind of kneaded into the bread, if you will, of your type. If you were a 3 wing, you would have some of the characteristic ambitious qualities of that type woven into yours as well. So it's a system that's very dynamic. It doesn't put people into boxes. It actually just shows them the box they're in and how to get out of it, right? And by the way, with your husband, has he told you that he thinks he's an 8?
Oh, no, we haven't really discussed it. Okay. I've discussed it a little bit, and I told him, about what I was doing and how I was talking with you. And he said, well, I'd have to, look at the questions. And because I talked about the questions help you determine what number you are. If you resonate with these certain things, then you're probably going to be whatever that number is. And he said, well, I'd have to see what those are. Yeah.
Yeah. So, because there's another number that looks like an 8, but is not an 8. And that's called a counterphobic 6. And so, when you get to that chapter, counterphobic 6s can oftentimes look like an 8 because they're aggressive, like 8s are, but for a whole different reason. They have a whole different motivation. It's driven less by anger and more by, underneath it is a little bit of fear. And so they become a little bit on the attack because there's a little bit of fear that's driving the attack. Anyhow, that's just something to consider.
That's interesting. I'm going to have to look into that, but I will say one of the things that you brought up about, and I don't know, I'm just guessing my husband is an 8, but there is, for the hard exterior, hard meaning assertive, let's say, aggressive. There is such a soft side. Yeah. Such a soft side on the interior that a lot of people don't get to see. And he's such a softie. I mean, probably a minimum of 5 times a day, more like 10, he tells me how much he loves me.
Oh, that's great.
And he appreciates. Yeah. So there is a soft side, and we have dogs, and we put our dogs first. And Yeah. So
How many close
it's really
friends does he
interesting though. I've a, a handful of really close friends that he'll call anytime, day or night. Yeah.
Yeah. And he would take a bullet
So
for them.
Well, that's another story. He has a bullet, so he wouldn't take a bullet.
Well, they're very,
So yeah, that's
loyal.
so loyal. Yeah. So
Oh,
loyal.
yeah.
Well, Ian, I am so excited. I hope to have you back on again because we could just go on and talk more and more about this. But I would love to have you talk again sometime, maybe next month, and we could get more questions from people. And after they've read your book, The Road Back to You, and I recommend getting the book. I've got it on my iPad, and I listen to it on audio while I'm driving, because oftentimes I catch so much. I've got so much of your book highlighted on my iPad, and I go back and I listen to it, and it's so helpful. This information, you guys, if you've never heard about the Enneagram, please check it out. Please, Ian, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you. How can they can get in touch with you and find out more about you?
Absolutely. So they can get the book on Amazon or at a local bookstore, The Road Back to You. They can go to exploreyourtype.com to take my assessment. But again, like I said, I really encourage people to get to read the book or take a workshop, because that's where you really get down into the nitty gritty and you get sure of your number. They can go to iancron.com, IANCRON.com. On Twitter, I'm at Ian Cron, IANCRON, and I'm on Instagram, Ian Morgan Cron there. And yeah, we've got so many cool things happening, workshops, and it's a great season because so many people are kind of learning about the Enneagram and realizing the benefits it can have in every area of their lives.
Absolutely. And if there are any other twos out there, call me. No, I'm not. Get in touch with me too, because what? That's a total two, isn't it?
To say.
See, it's a two. I'm a two. I told you.
I want to help. Really, I want to help you.
I want to help. Yes. No. So I'd love to continue this discussion. I would love for everybody to go to my facebook.com/Shemaine.Nugent, and continue the discussion there. Ian, thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to having you back on again, and everybody go check out Ian and his book, The Road Back to You. And I hope that you have a great day, Ian, and everybody else has a great day, and do something healthy and happy for yourself today. All right, you guys, thanks so much for joining me on this Rockin' Life. I'll see you soon. Bye.